Thank you. You're welcome. It's up to you.
One eye. Where do you sit? Where do you sit? You'll say it's
not possible.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta change it. Oh. You know, it's gotta stick with it.
No, somewhere in the Bible it says we
Or vegetables. What would you like? Salad. Okay. And what kind of dessert? You know, I have no basics.
They sit back. They never sit up. They always sit back. He's so short. He's so short. Well, there are other reasons. You know the other reasons.
Am I too tall for you?
I'm next over to her.
Never come down. Never come down.
I make it up as I go.
Okay, with me, I liked it last time. I should have more people.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another resident lecture. We're so pleased to be able to have the caliber of expertise here that we have living here at Sarasota Bay Club. Resident Marvin Mills teaches at Perry & Springs Lifelong Learning Academy. Didn't you teach at Perry? He did. So, as I said, we're very lucky to have him here. This is the third lecture in a series, and we're so pleased. Please give him a hand, and we'll get started.
Hello, is everybody able to hear me?
Yes.
Good. The series of three, for those of you who are here, the first one was on the Taj
Here's the
Mahal
mic.
in India.
Here's the mic. He has it.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Oh, okay, now can you hear me? Very good. The first one was on the Taj Mahal in India. The second was on the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in Israel. And this is going to be mainly about the Mosque of Cordoba in Spain, 8th century. And that will complete a trio of Islamic medieval buildings. Okay? So here we have the Mosque of Cordoba, which for Spain is a very important monument, one of their most important, and it is in the southern Spain. And as you can see, here it is, and this is the mosque, like that. This is its minaret, where they call to prayer. This is a nearby palace. This is the Guadalquivir River that goes down to the Atlantic at Cadiz, the city of Cadiz. And this is a Roman bridge that preceded it. My special message for the day and for the two previous lectures was that as these triumphs of Islamic architecture are known that way today, but they were not originally built as Islamic buildings. That's my thesis. And so this Mosque of Cordoba, which became a mosque, was a building that had been there, that Islam, through conquest, had taken over, fixed up, and used it as a mosque. In order to convince the world of this, I wrote a little book on the subject, and it's called The Origin of the Mosque of Cordoba. It's easy enough to get it to iUniverse. You can still buy this book. and very few people read it. They're not really very interested in the subject or whatever, but it's still available. What you see here is here is the first building I showed you. This is, of course, the Taj Mahal, which was supposed to be a 7th century Mughal Islamic building. I was able to convince some people, one of the means being to have it carbon-14 dated. That is, there is a technical way of dating buildings, which brought it to the 14th century, and I convinced some people that this was really an earlier building that was taken over by Islam. And here's the Temple Mount. This is Jerusalem. Sorry. Here's the Temple Mount. Here's Jerusalem. And here is the Dome of the Rock. Here, right here. And here's the Aqsa Mosque, which are today 2 Islamic buildings. And right here is the Wailing Wall. And out here is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Where is it? The Church of the Holy Sepulchre?
Where?
No, where is it on the map? I can't see.
I believe it's here.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So here's the Dome of the Rock. And in the middle of the Dome of the Rock, as I showed last time, is this cave. And this cave is believed to be actually the tip of Mount Moriah. And this is, by biblical history, the site of where Abraham was about to execute his son Isaac. But the Lord saved him from doing this, and he was never killed. And this is a painting by Rembrandt of that sacrifice, which never took place. Here's the Aqsa Mosque. And this is the Dome of the Rock, and in the distance, and the Western Wall over here.
Marvin,
Yeah,
would you mind standing in front of the board that you're going to draw on eventually? Because people are having trouble seeing since you're standing in front of that.
that better?
Thank
And
you.
here we have on the other side of the Wailing Wall, which I showed last time, these huge stones, 600-ton stones, which are part of the Wailing Wall, which I offered as a part of the proof that it could not really have been built by Herod in the 1st century AD, but must have been built by an earlier civilization that was capable somehow of handling 600-ton stones. And what it's all about is the Kaaba, K-A-A-B-A. Does everyone know what the Kaaba is? Does anyone not know what the Kaaba is? It's very essential these days when we are learning so much about Islam that we understand that this little box, some 40 feet square and about 60 feet high, was an ancient little building by biblical history, built by Abraham in about 2000 BC, and it is the object in Mecca in Arabia towards which all Muslims pray when they pray. That is, they face, no matter where they are, in which country, whenever, they will face towards the Kaaba and pray. And they will visit the Kaaba at least once in their lives, and they will perambulate around Sorry. Yeah, they will perambulate around like that. And this is a relatively newer mosque that was built around the Kaaba. The Kaaba is known to Islam by way of the Muhammad's night journey, a very famous episode in their religion, whereby Muhammad, up here, was able, from Mecca, to get on his steed, which is part donkey and part human, fly over the Kaaba, which you see here, and arrive in Jerusalem at the Temple Mount, which supposedly was not built yet, but he was able to get on a ladder, climb up to heaven, meet with the prophets who were there, including Moses and Christ, and discuss religion and point out to them that while they contributed to religion, that he, Muhammad, was the latest of the prophets, and he was the most informed, and he was the true carrier of belief in God. He then got back on his steed, went down the ladder, got back on his steed, and flew back to Mecca all in one night. And that's called Muhammad's night journey. Islamic conquest began shortly after Muhammad came to power in 632, and he swept with his armies of Arabs and Berbers from Arabia, here where Mecca is, and these green areas are the countries that he took over very quickly. As you can see here, in Syria and Iraq and Egypt and all along the North Africa, until the spread was all the way into Central Asia and into Spain, though the map is not quite right because not all of Spain was conquered, only the northern part of it. Spain was contested for hundreds of years until 1492, when the Arabs were ordered expelled from Spain, and the Jews were ordered expelled at the same time somehow that Columbus discovered America, 1492. The greatest of the historians of the 19th century was Creswell. And this is his judgment about architecture of Islam. And he says, it would appear that before Islam, Arabs had but the crudest notions of buildings, and that in the early days of Islam, they brought nothing to architecture to the conquered countries beyond their simple ritual requirements. At this time, the population were nomads, and the finest architecture was a tent of camel's hair. Arabia constituted an almost perfect architectural vacuum. And the reason that statement is interesting is that somehow, in a relatively short time, Islam was able to create some of the most sophisticated and advanced monuments in the world, such as the 3 buildings that I announced. So what I wanted to do was take a chance and, together with you, make a mosque. Shall we try that? Because, now, how do you make a mosque? What do you need to make a mosque? Well, the first thing you need to make any building is you've got to have a client. So you get a client, you get a population that needs a mosque. And you need a city, because a mosque is a fairly big structure. That is, it's not just a little building, it is for the whole town, and therefore it has to hold everybody in it. So you have to get the city you need. And where are you going to put the mosque? You have to put the mosque in the middle of the city, because it's only natural that people should be able to get to it from every part of it. But the main need of the mosque is its orientation. Every mosque, theoretically, must face Mecca. And you can be sure that out here in Sarasota, where there is a mosque in our neighborhood, in Lockwood, that mosque faces Mecca. Because the Arabs did know their math and were able to figure out from any city in any area where the direction was to Mecca. So that's important too. So, let me begin by saying that was Mecca, if you could see that. And that means that the head of the building, the face of the building, must be perpendicular to that direction. And that face of that building is called the Qibla wall, Q-I-B-L-A, Qibla wall. And in the center of that Qibla wall is a niche. This is standard procedure for making a mosque. And in that niche, what is there? The answer is nothing. Nothing is in that niche. It's empty. Why is it empty? Because Islam does not have statues or idols or human representation. So Allah is there, but only in a spiritual sense. So the mihrab, that niche in the Qibla wall, is for Allah. And that's where everybody's direction is attended. So, around that wall, you need a place for people to pray. And that's called the Maqsura, the Maqsura. So, and what is that place? It's almost always either square or rectangular the long way, because all the faithful here are on their mats, and they're all facing the mihrab, and next to the mihrab is a little staircase. And on top of the staircase is the imam, and he's leading the prayer. So everybody's attention is directed to this covered area where they have all these columns holding it up like that. And here on center, that's the main part of the mosque. In front of that is a courtyard, which makes sense. That's because you need a place to assemble. People come to assemble, it's not yet time to go in. They're in the courtyard. They come in through the various doors here. They come in, and there's an ablution. They wash their feet. And they get ready to go in. And while they're getting ready, there's an arcade which protects them from the sun. And next to the entryway is the minaret. And the minaret is the call to prayer that goes way up. And how do they call to prayer? How do Christians call to prayer? They have a bell. And how do Jews call to prayer? They have a shofar. And how do Muslims call to prayer? They call by voice. They call by voice 5 times a day. So that's basically what a mosque is. It's a really very simple structure. It has no basement. It has no attic. It's basically for men, but women can go in through their own entrance, and but they mustn't mingle with the faithful here. They're either on the sides or on the back, or here in town, they're up on a balcony, but they are segregated. So, any questions about how to make a mosque? That's how you make a mosque. Nothing to it. So, there is a mosque. And it's the Mosque of Cairo in Tunisia. Very much like the Mosque of Cordoba in Spain. There are all its features. There's the minaret, there's the courtyard, there's the maksura, where they sit, where they kneel to worship. There is the mihrab down here, and out that way is Mecca, and here's the town. Generally, the mosques are very simple on the outside, blending in with the community, and the inside is paradise. It's heaven. It's decorated. There's tile, there's light, there's color. Now, the problem is, as I said, are these buildings original? Does this mosque face Mecca, for example? No, it does not. Half the medieval buildings that have been reported by my colleague David King, who's a mathematician and an Arabist, points out that no, they do not face Mecca. So this one does not face Mecca. Now, let's talk a little bit about the so-called Golden Age of Spain. The Golden Age of Spain was the time when the mosque was built. That is the time of the Muslim rule, which was from the 8th century to the 11th century. And this is a statue that's still there of Maimonides, the great Jewish philosopher, a statue in Cordoba. And what does he have to say about the Golden Age of Spain? He says this: this was not, according to him, the period of what they call in Spanish convivencia, that is the living together time, when the Jews never had it so good in foreign countries. He's talking about that God has hurled us in the midst of this people who have persecuted us severely and passed painful and discriminatory legislation against us. Never did a nation molest, degrade, debase, and hate us as much as they. They were dishonored beyond human endurance. We have acquiesced, both young and old, to inure ourselves to humiliation. All this notwithstanding, we do not escape this continued maltreatment which will nigh crushes us. No matter how we suffer and elect to remain at peace with them, they stir up strife and sedition. So says the most important Jewish philosopher in Spain. And this is what happened at that time. They call the conquest, Islam calls the conquest of other countries, the fight for that conquest, the Jihad, a very important word today in our current events. And the Quran, which is the spiritual and social, political, economic guide for Islam, has this to say about the Jihad, that this is something that we have to do, that Islam has to spread around the world, that there is no other solution in religion or in politics, that we must work to bring all countries under our submission, and that any area that we conquer must either do one of three things. It must either submit and give up. It must not submit. It must either submit and pay the jizya, that is, pay the tax, and live under this subordinate condition. It can leave, or it can give up. It will die, and that's what conquered peoples must do. And this is not something I'm saying because I'm mad at Islam. It's something I'm saying because it's in the Quran. And to say otherwise, it would be heresy or apostasy. This is what the Quran instructs people. So it's a very big burden on Islamic people, say in this country or in any country, to disregard what is considered their true destiny, because the Quran. What is that? I don't know how that happened. Walking off. I'm at a loss. I can't explain that. Mark, you know anything about this thing?
No, I don't.
You have to take a break, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to it. Does anyone know about the mechanism here in the room?
Laura.
Kathleen?
Laura.
Could someone get Kathleen for me?
Laura went together.
Okay.
Laura went together.
Oh,
It's updating.
wait, they just changed it suddenly. Is she coming down?
It's,
Oh, you can't find it?
It's rebooting, just give it a minute.
yeah, I think it's going to come
Yeah,
back
it
on.
had a problem, so it shut itself off, and now it's rebooting. It should come up, you should have your icon. You didn't press any buttons.
No, there aren't. Only off four buttons.
Windows is pretty. Windows is kind of well.
Well, all right, while we're waiting for this, I'll describe the Mosque of Cordoba and why I consider it an older building. I had mentioned that the Mosque of Cairo in Tunisia did not face Mecca. This is also true of the Mosque of Cordoba. The Mosque of Cordoba is about 50 degrees off from Mecca. It doesn't nearly begin to face Mecca. It's also true that As I mentioned, a mosque, to be well designed, should be in the middle of the city so that it could reach everybody. But this mosque is at the edge of the city. So it's by the river, which is on one side, instead of being in the middle of Cordoba. That means it's not easily accessible to the community. Its minaret is very high, over 100 feet high. And Islam, when it calls to prayer, does so by voice. And if you're up too high, it's really not possible to reach people below because the voice doesn't carry that well. So ordinarily you wouldn't have a minaret up that's high. Now, I mentioned too that mosques don't have basements because they have no need for basement. But this mosque has a basement because I've been down in it and I've looked at their basement. The walls that surround the mosque are very strong. They have abutments and they have reinforcing, which is you wouldn't ordinarily need for the mosque. It's not supposed to be a fortress, but it would be useful if the building was meant to be a storage place, a warehouse. In my view, you see, the building was originally built at an earlier time by a different people known as the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were people who came basically from Lebanon, where we are. And they were the master traders in the early times, in the 12th century, 11th century, up until the time of Carthage. And they went to Spain. And they went to Spain because there was metals in Spain to take back to the Near East. What have we here?
PowerPoint. Where is the actual computer? Where is the computer?
That one on the right, that one.
Maybe
Well, Phoenicia is what he's talking about.
Turn into a master technician. So, it's my belief that these people, the Phoenicians, who were wealthy traders, masters of the Mediterranean, they came to Spain, and there were people that were already there, the Tartessians, and they set up communities on the coast, and they went up the Guadalquivir River, and they set up the Mosque of Cordoba and built the beginnings of Cordoba around it.
Was their religion similar to Islam or what?
No, this was well before, this was well before Islam. This is something like 1100 BC. And Islam is...
But basically Islam took the basic features and called them their own. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. So they took the features of this combination temple, warehouse, observatory that was this building, and they made it into a mosque. And that became the standard mosque for Islam. And thus you have other buildings like in North Africa that look very much like the Mosque of Cordoba. Now here is a map of Cordoba. This is the mosque. This is the Roman bridge. This is the palace. And notice I mentioned this is a wall around Cordoba. And this is a palace. And you can see that this is the direction of Mecca, and Mecca is actually this way, to the east. Now, you'll notice too that Cordoba got a sort of broken neck over here. It seems to me that, and the scholars say this is the case, that Cordoba was made up of an earlier Cordoba and the Roman Cordoba. And the Roman Cordoba is a north-south sort of thing, and the earlier Cordoba is not, and that accounts for its change in shape. And these are subsequent mosques that do face Mecca, and this is Mosque of Cordoba. And here are the Phoenicians on their trade routes, in their commerce in the Mediterranean. And here is where they land at Cadiz, and here is where the Guadalquivir River is, and here is where Cordoba and the other cities of Granada, Seville, and there are other settlements, Phoenician settlements along the Atlantic. And the Phoenicians went even further. They went up here to England in order to get tin from England. And tin was useful for making bronze, along with the, as a very important metal. And here are the settlements in Spain. These are various towns in Spain. Here's Cadiz, here is the Guadalquivir, and here's a big metal area, Huelva. One of the things that was found in Spain, which is a big mystery, they found this statue called La Dama de Elche, found in the town of Elche in Andalusia. A haunting, a bust of a woman that seems to have no precedent in Spanish history. And she has these, what look like gigantic earmuffs, which has no relation to anything in Spain. And she's some sort of royalty, having a big pendant here. And there have been a few of these Dama de Elches found in Spain, for which no one has an answer for. I would suggest that these are from Phoenician era and belong to an earlier period. Here's La Dama del Cape.
Where were the Phoenicians originally from?
Lebanon. Lebanon. The coast on the Mediterranean, on the eastern side, where Lebanon is now. Now, we know very little about the Phoenicians, and there's ruins around, but not much to tell us, but we do something about them from artwork from the Assyrians. And here is a drawing of their city, Phoenician city, which was conquered by the Assyrians. And here you can see the roof line and the side of the city. Here, what I'm suggesting is that this being a drawing from the Assyrians, showing these are entryways to the wall of a Phoenician city. These are the top along the roof line, and this is the water. I'm suggesting that this is very much like what the Mosque of Cordoba looks like. And this is the Mosque of Cordoba today. This whole mess here in the middle is a cathedral. And when the Christians won back Spain in the 13th century, they built right in the middle of the mosque their own religious center, their cathedral, right in the middle, and it's there today. And it projects up through the middle of the mosque, up through the roof. So that's this area here. Here is what I was talking about. The mihrab is here. Here is the courtyard. Here is the maksura. And here is the minaret. Now, they're supposed to be built, the mosque is supposed to be built in 4 stages. This is, every book on Islamic Spain will tell you it was built in 4 stages. And that, this is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. In other words, it kept growing. And this is the way it looked in stage 3. Stage 3 lasted a long time. This whole thing took place from 786 to 1015. In other words, 250 years of growth. But for a long period then, this is the way it looked. Now, I gave you the fundamentals of how to build a mosque. I cautioned that the maksura, the prayer area, had to be square or rectangular so it could be close to the mihrab and close to the imam. It would never be built this way, long and skinny. There are no mosques practically that are long and skinny because it's impractical. It means that someone back here can't see or hear what's going on up there. There's just no way to do it. The inside, though, is fabulous. These colors are not very true. But this is the inside of the Mosque of Cordoba. And because it's such a big space inside, you have to have a fairly high ceiling. Otherwise, it wouldn't be right. So in order to create a high ceiling, they have these various columns, creating what we call bays, a bay of 4 columns. And up here, the columns are extended up to the ceiling. Halfway up, there is a horseshoe arch, like that. And then there's another arch up further here, and then you get to the ceiling. That gives it enough height. This is a very unusual, a very beautiful way to handle the situation, but it was never done before. Nothing like it was done before anywhere, and somehow miraculously we are told to believe that Islam came upon the scene and with great virtuosity and creativity were able to do this. But in architecture we know there has to be precedence. Things happen in some development sense, and they don't just arrive. These things here, these pie-shaped things are called voussoirs. Voussoir. Mario, you know that term, voussoir? A fancy French term meaning of a pie-shaped infill. Pie-shaped, it's here, and it alternates pie-shaped is brick and stone, red and white, and you walk through here, the central nave, all the way to the mirror. You get a clear shot. And you would have down here, you would have the prayer mats, and the faithful would be bending down, kneeling down, and facing towards the front. On the outside, though, it's much plainer. On the outside, it looks like this, somewhat like that drawing from Assyria, showing with the wall of a captured city. And here, you see, this is the southwest corner. There are various entryways. Here's what they call crenellated roof, that there's little crenellations on top. And here are these various abutments holding the wall in. Now, what this diagram shows is that I'm the only one in the world that they know of who has taken the trouble to carbon date the Mosque of Cordoba. And you would think that might be a revelation to other scholars to do something about it and follow up. Nobody's ever followed it up that I've never been aware of. And this shows me 5 or 6 different samples that I took from different places here, and around the mosque of wood. Of course, there are wood beams in this mosque, and you can date wood beams to 50 or 100 years with pretty good certainty. But it's this one here that most intrigued me. Anyway, the one on the left, you see where it says sample number 2? That dates 810 BC. 810 BC. That's a very interesting date, since it was supposed to have been built around 780 AD. That's a difference of more than 1,000 years. And the samples date on different times, but this is not unusual for a building that's been around for a long time, because it has a life of its own, and it's built and rebuilt over and over. A view from the roof, looking down from the mosque, looking at the town below. And the roof on top. What you're looking at are gables here, because there's the cathedral, you see, that penetrated up, that was built later. And this is a way of their supporting the roof, and at the same time creating a way for the water to get off the roof, to run off. And here's the courtyard and the various entrances. And here is a view from the minaret looking over at the cathedral and at the roof and at the courtyard below.
Marvin,
Yes?
those carbon analyses that were done, what was the basis of the age before the carbon analysis was done?
What was the basis?
What did people think about when these were built?
They still think the same thing. Why carbon analysis meant nothing to the world. Nothing. Zero. They just disregarded it. No scholar would follow up on it, would dare to. They just don't. They don't. You would think they would try to do it themselves. It's not hard. I had government permission. The Spanish government helped me do this. I got these wooden pieces, took them home, took them to a reliable laboratory, and changed the picture of the history of the mosque. My picture, not the world's picture.
Why do you think it is that nobody else picked up on it?
Because people, scholars especially, are dedicated to their points of view. A person who has all his life thought one way, and you come by and tell him another, he's not going to change his mind so easy. Not that or anybody else. Especially if he's written on it. That means what he wrote is wrong. Not going to do it. And not only that, I'm a nobody. If I had a real big name, he'd say, oh, so-and-so, okay. Then he could say, but he's not going to cite a nobody. This is in the nature of humanity, I'm afraid. So here's the Roman bridge. And here's on the side, southeast side of the mosque, you see I was able to obtain a ladder. And see that gorgeous creature there? Who was that? Laura. She was there. She was my helper. And she was there. And what we were after here with that ladder was up here. Here's one of the voussoirs made of brick. I wanted a sample of brick so I could use that. Try to get that to, because with brick you can also date a building sometimes, but not always. So my brick samples didn't succeed, but that's when I was there. That's why that ladder was there. And here's the cathedral, 16th century is when it was built, in the middle of the mosque. A glorious cathedral, but really completely out of place in a glorious building, regardless of who built the original building. This was not a place for a cathedral. When you get to closer to the mihrab, the supports for the roof become very elaborate, and you have this sort of arch between the columns, you see. So this is like a Baroque treatment that was very new, very individual. And above the mosque, above the mihrab, in a mosque often, I didn't mention, but often there is a dome just in front of the mihrab with windows in the dome above to let in light, so that particular area is illuminated. And so when you look up, and you're in front of the mihrab, and you look up, there is this marvelous cupola with these interlacing arches. You see here, and here these arches that go leaping around and tying into each other, and here's the cupola above and windows over here. It's one of the most beautiful cupolas in the world.
Who did the artwork?
Who did the artwork? Nobody knows. They don't know the name of it. That's quite typical in the ancient times. Today, the artist would be known, but they didn't always know who the artist was. It was just didn't know. Yes?
I have two questions. In the prayer hall in the mosque, the top of the arches were yellow and rust. Is there a significance to the colors?
Well, they're red and white, and the significance, I don't know any, except that it has been done before. There are other places where there are arches that do alternate that way. It's colorful, but I don't know of any symbolic significance.
There's no significance to that faith for yellow or rust. It's just because of its colorful.
I don't know of any.
And my question, the other question is, a lot of the architecture is triangular. Is there any reason, is it pointing to their God by being triangular on the mosque and so on? It's straight line and a lot of it is triangular.
I don't know. Say that. What is triangular? Where?
In the pictures that you show us, a lot of the architecture, there was triangular triangles here as they were building.
I have no significance for this.
Thank you.
I think I can help you.
Listen, Sarah.
Now here is the mihrab itself. This also is an indication that this may not be Islamic, because a standard for Islamic architecture is the mihrab is a niche. It's just a cutout area. It's either an arch, or it's rectangular. But this is a room. This is a room. Oh, went too fast. Here it is. And this is the ceiling in the room. Here's the cupola above. We're looking straight up now. And this is support for, this is the room here. Let me show you. And here is a section through the room. See, with these scalloped type arch, which lead nowhere here, and a scallop here for the ceiling. This is in my view, what was that room all about? This was a room for the Phoenician god Melkart, the god of commerce. And he was probably there to be worshipped. And here's inside. And here's Melkart, god of commerce. There are beautiful parts to this whole building. This is a marble panel on the wall outside, or inside the mosque. This is a Arabesque type treatment. This is considered a typical Arab type of decoration, but it could equally precede the Islamic era. Now, this is the minaret, and this is very strange, because the minaret you're looking at is a Renaissance minaret. And you can see it looks like a Renaissance minaret. Here it is. It doesn't look Arabic. It is like the Renaissance. And what it is, it's a jacket. It's a covering over the minaret. Too loud? No? I'm in the way? It's a building over the building. It's a cover over. That inside this minaret is the original minaret.
How high is this? About how high is that?
It's over 100 feet high. It's very high, and it has 108 steps inside. So there's the bell, you see, for the conquering Christians to call to prayer, because they converted the mosque to a cathedral. Some Arabs in Spain now would like to see the mosque revert to being a mosque again and not a cathedral. So there is some controversy there. Here's the original minaret inside. You see? But part of that still exists, but this is the way it looked originally. That you would go inside, and there'd be two stairways going up to a platform, and up here. What's my theory? What is that building all about? My theory is that there are two purposes to that original tower. One was, it was a watchtower for commerce coming up the river. They could look out and see which ships were coming, or if there were enemies, which enemies were coming. And the other stairway perhaps was used for astronomical reasons, so that you could be up here on this platform and observe the heavens. And this is a window in the original tower. And notice there's the same horseshoe arch here. There's a horseshoe arch. That supports the columns inside. And here's a plan, you see, and there the black is the wall and the white is the staircase. Here are the two staircases, which is a mystery today, and you can have your own theory why there are two staircases. There's the original. If you go inside, there's part of the original inside. And inside the mosque, inside the wall of the mosque, are these wood frames, every 20 or 30 feet going up. And that's a very happy circumstance from my point of view, because I took the trouble to get a piece of the wood frame to have it carbon 14 dated. And one of my helpers came by with a saw, and there was a piece of the frame sticking out, and he posed for a picture of him sawing off a piece of the frame. Laura and I then afterwards went to London and went to Oxford, and we sought out the laboratory to get all these wood samples dated. Unfortunately for me, the minaret did not date to the Phoenician era. I'd hoped it would, but it didn't. It dated later. Why it's dated later, I can't say, unless it was something built and rebuilt, and I can't explain it. But neither does it date to the Islamic era. What's really needed for this whole building is a group who are dedicated as a team to rework and restudy the whole thing from a lot of points of view and get many samples and take another fresh look at what was going on here. See, here's one of the doorways, and there's your alternating voussoirs. And here, these blind arches on the outside. They're blind because they don't lead anywhere. They look like windows, but they don't lead into windows. And here's a marble grill. This is what Islam is famous for. This geometric arrangement of design. Now, what I did here, I mentioned earlier that the scholars tell us that the mosque was built in 4 stages. Well, if they're built in 4 stages, that means that there are joints between the stages. Otherwise, what do you do when you come by 50 years later and you add a piece on? You have to have a joint between the two. So I got a hold of a little child's blackboard that you see here. I became with it, and I put it on the wall where a joint is supposed to be. There's supposed to be a joint here, separating one phase from another. And lo and behold, there is no joint, which leads me to believe the whole theory of 4 stages for the construction of the building is not true. Also, Islam has a thing about, in sacred buildings, of having not only human representation, which would be out of the question, but having any sort of living representation. But there were still surviving a few gargoyles that are up near the roof, such as this one. And these gargoyles look like they're integral with the building. They look like medieval gargoyles from the Middle Ages. Finding such a thing on any other mosque anywhere in the world would be impossible. They wouldn't be there. So what's it doing there? The only thing I can think of is either it was added by the Christians after the conquest, which is hard to believe because I don't see any joints I don't see any attachments. It looks like it's part of the building, or gargoyles was something that the Phoenicians knew about and passed it on into the Middle Ages. And here's another gargoyle, you see. And this is a spout above where the water's coming off the roof. And here's the gargoyle. And here's your mosque with its 4 stages. Here's the court, the minaret, first stage, second stage added to it, third stage added to it, and fourth stage here. So this is the third stage, which I said is very unlikely. So what's my theory? My theory is called an imaginative reconstruction. And I believe that the original building looked like this. That the original building, had this wall around it, and it went this far. Here it was. And that this was at the court extended around, and this was used for a warehouse, for an astronomical observatory, and for protection, and a temple, all of that. And how does the building face? The building is tipped at 30 degrees, like that. Very purposefully tipped at that angle. Why was it tipped at that angle? Nobody knows. I don't know. Except I have one theory. The Kaaba is also tipped at 30 degrees. So is this. The Kaaba is a rectangle of sorts, but a distorted rectangle. So is this. I have a theory that this building was meant to parallel the Kaaba. It's worth looking into. And here's how 30 degrees, not only 30 degrees, but the mosque is located in Spain so that the midsummer sunrise solstice is able to, when sighted along this wall, catches the sun. So that it was, the building's location was such that it satisfied 2 needs: to be at 30 degrees and to catch the orientation of the sun. The Kaaba was tipped at 30 degrees and it catches the orientation of the moon. This is not my view. This is again David King, the Arabist and mathematician. But this is towards the moon, not the sun. This is Stonehenge in England, 2500 BC. And this is what Stonehenge looks like. And this is the ring around Stonehenge. Yeah. 56 posts. But this is getting a little complicated, and I don't want to push it too far. But the 56 is an important number for having to do with eclipses of the moon and of the sun, and that the Mosque of Cordoba, I believe, also had a way of keeping track, because it has 19 bays, and if you go 3 times, 19, 18, 18, you come to 56. And that's just a theory worth looking into. Up in the attic, not the attic, but in the roof, under the gables, there are these wood beams. And if you look close, you see a little hole. That little hole is something I drilled in it. And I drilled in it with what they call today a makita. You know, the Japanese handheld drill? You who are mechanically inclined. That was when they first came out with a handheld drill that needed no plug-in. In other words, they worked on a battery. And if you had the right type of implement, the drill, you could, with a core, you could drill with a tube as a core and get the wood sample. So I got some wood samples from here with Spain's permission, and I took them back to New York to be dated. And this is what those beams look like. And this is the result of the carbon-14 dating of the roof beam. And this is me going down into the basement.
Was this last year?
You can go on down through the floor, lift up the tile, and go down into the basement. Nobody goes down into the basement that I know of. What are the rods of the ladder? The rods of the ladder. There you got me. Wait a minute, let me go back. You see rods? Rods of the ladder? It must be. I don't know. Yeah, there's the ladder. See, going down into the basement. Now, so much for the Mosque of Cordoba. I've taken up your time. I could go further because there were two other buildings that the leaflet, the flyer talked about. That is the Alhambra and the Medina.
Are there any contemporary mosques that have been built in our generation or generations before?
Contemporary mosques that do what?
I don't know. Are there any other mosques? When someone says the Greeks are building a mosque in New York.
There are many mosques that are built everywhere.
Did they build one that you know of, or did they just use the term loosely?
Loosely, never loosely. Mosques are very sacred
It's a
buildings.
place of religion, is that correct?
For religious purposes, of course.
And have they built any recent buildings?
Right here in Sarasota.
In here?
Sure.
Where is it?
It's on Lockwood Ridge off of University. We were there on a visit. You could go. These are very nice people. And in America, I should point out, Islamic people are much more integrated than they are in Europe. A lot of the problems is that
Now, the structure of the mosque that they're building today, does that follow the form that you were talking about on this whole lecture?
to a large extent.
Square, or are they round?
They do all kinds of things. So it doesn't quite always follow this
Because
form.
I thought the mosques, as I know them to be, are to be round.
Well,
And
the dome,
others are
yes, they do have domes on them, right. And they do face Mecca, and they do have a mihrab.
I see.
And they often have a place for women that they never had before.
In Sarasota, how does one face Mecca? Is that Lakewood Ranch or what?
Well, figure it out. Where is Arabia from Sarasota? It's off to the east
No, I mean
somewhere.
specifically, you have a mosque here in Sarasota.
Yeah.
Which way does it face?
It faces easterly. And I can tell you without a compass. It has to.
I just face east.
But if you Google it, you can Google directions, and you Google in directions, and you Google in Sarasota to Mecca, it'll give you a very exact direction. Very exact.
Generally east, is that it?
I know it's east probably because it has to be east, but it's exactly east. If I were building, I would consult Google and get the right.
When you said somebody did not face Mecca,
I'll say it again.
you said that there were several that you said they actually did not face.
Yes, the media of the mosque didn't. Because, why? Because armies came to a lush type of country, and they found buildings, and they said, you're a mosque, you're a mosque. And they became a mosque. And if they found buildings that were built by Phoenicians, they could say, we could use you. And if they didn't face Mecca, too bad. Nobody's perfect.
So much for a month.
So much for mine. Well, it's,
What's in their name?
What's in the name? Well, no, it's important. You can excuse that. It's not, I mean, it's important, but it's not the end of the world. So, anyway, I can't go to the Alhambra and the Mosque of Medina, except to say that I add those to my list of buildings that are not originally Islamic. They are not. The Granada and Medina, if we have time someday for another tour, we can go into that. But enough for one day, except for questions and comments. All right? So if you have questions and comments,
I'm wondering, what take away from building was built by many different civilizations?
Go ahead.
yes. What to take away from this? I would say that mankind is capable of building magnificent structures. That the buildings have a life of their own. They go through various phases. And that if history wants to know how they began, be careful, because different peoples claim different things about why did it, you know, because it's great pride, and they write the history books. So if you want to correct history of architecture, you have to be careful. Check with me. Any other questions, comments? That's a long story. I attempted to, but if you make a doctorate and you are too heretic, you will not get a doctorate. So I got no doctorate. I couldn't. And I was not willing to. You better believe it. Because if you have a group of scholars judging your work and they say, that's not possible, that's not possible. I said, well, look at the facts, that's not possible, that's not possible. And you've had it.
What is your background? Are you an architect? Are you
Yes.
an archaeologist?
No, I'm a historian of architecture. I've taught that in about eight or so universities, and I wrote this book. That's my background.
Very lucky, thank you.
What did you find in the basement? Did you find?
Wait a minute. What?
What did you find when you went down in the basement?
What I found in the basement?
Yes.
There was empty spaces with columns, matching the columns above, and there were tiled walls. Tiled walls. Tiled, little tile, mosaic tile. That's what I found.
Did they ever use the basement?
I would think they did, for storage, in my view.
The Byzantine Empire. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you maybe to describe we know we had our nation group, the people from the mosque here, local mosque, we had the Phoenician group. You went to the actual mosque.
Yes.
Can you describe something about that?
Well, I'm not going to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So how many times was you there?
Yes, huge box.